Hey, what's up guys? Guardian here, coming to you guys with a deck profile update on my Bastion deck for set 4. So set 4 came out not too long ago, and we got the addition of the brand new Grade 4 Bastion Prime. He's a really cool card, and I've been enjoying this deck quite a lot. So let's get stuck into it. So for the Bastion ride line, things haven't really changed that much. We still have base, of course, for our starter. We then have the fort, of course, where when you ride on him with your rooks, you reveal 2 grade 3s, and then you get to look at the top of the deck. As long as it's a unit, you get to call it, and if it isn't, it goes to the drop zone. So we do play an order in this deck, unfortunately, so that can happen, but it doesn't happen too often, so it's not too bad. Especially for a 3+, I think that's pretty worth. Then, of course, we have the Rooks. The Rooks is when you ride your Bastion on him, you reveal 3 grade 3s in your hand to then draw a card. So an extra plus there as well. So you just get a lot of free advantage with this Bastion ride line, and it's why I don't opt into the Blast the Dark route, because you got to use Counterblast, and we do need to hold on to our resources for some other cards in the deck. So the Bastion ride line is still well and truly the way to go, I feel. And then, of course, we have Bastion himself. Bastion, you'll still have a good grade 3 turn with him usually. So obviously, if you reveal a grade 3 from the drive check, you discard a card from your hand, and then you get to restand one of your rested grade 3s and give it 10,000 power. So yeah, just normal Bastion stuff, and it's the typical Bastion ride line that we all know and love. So, moving on over to the main deck here, we're going to be starting with the grade 4s, since that's now a thing. We have 4 copies of Bastion Prime. So this guy is really cool. So he's got a somewhat similar passive effect to the grade 3 Bastion, but a little bit different, but not too much. So basically, during your turn, your front row will get 2,000 power, so this will allow you to hit some magic numbers still, which is really nice. But then also the main skill is Vanguard once per turn. At the end of the battle that you're drive checked, revealed a grade 3 or greater card, so it does work when you drive check the grade 4. You may pay the cost of putting a Bastion card from your soul or your hand to the drop zone. From your soul or hand, you put it into the drop zone, and you restand all of your grade 3 rear guards, and they get 10,000 power till end of turn. So you're basically standing up both your rear guard columns, which is really good. And that's 20k in each column, basically, since it's 10k to each of those grade 3s that would be there. So it's a very big push. Now, obviously, one thing you'll notice with set 4 is that we are pretty much giving up the Persona Ride power here for a exchange of a grade 4 power here, which is really good. But also with the grade 4s, they have a triple drive as well. So you will be triple driving, so you have 3 chances to get that skill active, which is really good, since we only had the twin drive before to rely on the Bastion skill. So Bastion Prime, really powerful, really strong, and we need to play 4 of him just so that we can have a good chance to see him for the turn 4. But also we need the Bastion names as well for the cost as well. So 4 copies of Bastion Prime, really cool card. And as for paying the cost, we do need Bastion names, so we are still playing the 3 additional copies of Bastion. Now, when you do not see the Bastion Prime, it is important that when you don't see this, you do have the normal grade 3 Bastion to Persona Ride on, just so that you have a good, strong turn 4. Since if you're not using the Bastion Prime, you pretty much need to be relying on seeing this instead, which is a nice fallback. But if you do have Bastion Prime, you're pretty much going to be using these for the cost of Bastion Prime, so that you can keep that rolling and keep the pressure up, basically. Just so that you can keep going with that cost and be able to use the skill consistently, right? So 3 copies of the Bastion, the regular Apex Ruler Bastion. Alright, so next for the grade 3s, we have the 4 copies of Alden. So Alden's pretty much been a mainstay since Bastion, came to forth with the set 1. And it's still good. Counterblast 2, Soul Blast 1, call a grade 3 in the hand to get a draw 2. Really good, gives you plenty of resources to work with. And then, of course, it has the 5,000 power skill when it attacks, as long as you got the correct number of grade 3s. So, Alden's pretty much a mainstay. It's a staple, still sticking with it. And it's even more important now just because we do need this so that we can see more pieces in the deck to fulfill a field, basically. So another grade 3 that we got, which I actually quite like, which actually pairs up very nicely with Alden, is the 4 copies of the Spare. So Spare is pretty cool. So he has a front row and a back row rear guard skill. So the front row skill is that when this unit is stood by your Vanguard's ability, you Soul Blast 2 to draw a card. So the cool thing in this deck is that we don't really use the soul that often, besides on like Alden's skill, but we're only going to use that once, usually twice, usually. But with this, we do have that 2 soul left over from the ride line to get that Soul Blast 2 to draw an additional card. And the reason this is important is that we do want to be drawing cards as much as we can in the early stages of the game so that we can then consistently get to that Bastion Prime for the turn 4. So I do like playing 4 copies of this just for maximum consistency and just maximum opportunity to be drawing cards more and more often. So that's why I like this. But then after that, it actually has a back row rearguard skill, which is useful later, which is during your turn, all of your other rearguards in the same column as this unit get 5,000 power. So yeah, you can make this into a pretty good booster overall, and it gets some really large columns going, which is really, really nice. And yeah, I think Spara is a really solid double R and really good for the deck. So I like playing 4 copies of this, just with the draw, but then also the potential power boosting later on. Now, in case you're wondering how we're going to be boosting, we're not using Darkstray in the deck, since we do need Soul Blast for other cards in the deck now. But instead we're playing a order that came out in set 3, which is Pride to Protect. So you might have seen this in a lot of other Bastion decks, but basically it's a set order that you play by discarding a card, so it does cost like a -1 technically. But you get a really good effect here, which is whilst this card's in the order zone, all of your grade 3 rearguards can boost, which is fantastic. So now the Spara can now use that power allocation and its own power to get basically like an 18k boost in a column now, basically, which is really, really good. And of course, just facilitating more boosts overall with your grade 3s means that all of your grade 3s will just have massive power and loads of pressure when it comes to your Bastion Prime turn, since of course you'll be restanding everything with the Bastion Prime, and you'll have just a ton of power to go alongside it when pushing to hopefully close out the game. So yeah, the Pride to Protect, you only really need to get 1 of it onto the field, so I feel like 4 is a bit too many. And then 2 is a little bit clutch to the point where you might not see it consistently enough. So I went for the 3. And then if you see extra copies of these, you can always discard them for other costs like Bastion, the ride deck, or even itself, you know, because you do have to discard a card. So I feel like 3 is a pretty solid number for this order. So 3 copies of that. And then next we are playing the 3 copies of Refluke. Refluke is just a really solid utility piece. The reason I like sticking with the 3 Refluke is because it actually enables you to activate Alden's skill. So usually on a turn 3, what I'll do is that I'll do an Alden skill with a Spara to get like maximum draw potential. But then after this, you'll only have the Bastion left in the soul, which you would prefer to keep for the Bastion Prime skill. But this is fine though, because if you can soul charge in 1 Refluke or get like a soul charge in through like the critical trigger from like the early game, then you can set up 1 more Soul Blast for an Alden skill to then get more draws later on. It doesn't matter too much that you can't use the Spara skill, since it is a Soul Blast 2 instead. It's a little bit more costly, but at least you can get the 1 soul, so that you can Counter Blast 2 again and Soul Blast 1 for an extra draw 2 later in the game if you end up grinding a bit later. So I do like playing the 3 Refluke for that reason, just so that we have those resources available when we need them. And also the 10,000 power boost can also be handy when we want to do a push turn. So that's kind of why I stuck with the Refluke in the deck at 3. And then another 3 of that we have is a brand new defensive grade 3, which is the 3 copies of Embrace Dragon. So this is actually a really cool card. So basically, when your grade 2 or greater unit is being attacked, you can put this into the Guardian Circle and give that unit 10,000 power. So this gives us a little bit of a defensive early game now, with the ability to basically give your unit the 10k, but then also, if the unit that's being attacked is a grade 4 card, it gets 20,000 power instead of 10,000. So this is basically a 20k shield late game when we get to Bastion Prime, which is really, really nice. But then if we do need to use this in the early game to, you know, keep the tempo under control, we can use this as a 10k shield instead if need be. So I quite like this at 3. You could maybe bump it to 4 if you can find the space, but I couldn't really find the space otherwise because I wanted to play some other cards in the deck. So yeah, 3 of it is kind of suiting for me. And also, I am playing front triggers in my build, so I do have access to more shield value in my trigger lineup. So before we get there, though, we do have 1 more grade 3, and that is with the 2 copies of Fleant. Now, this is more of a flex slot on this deck that you could probably swap out for other cards that I've seen, like the Lag Rail, for example. The reason I decided not to go for the Lag Rail is just because I kind of wanted to go for more of a, I suppose, a straightforward build, just more of a greedy aggro build. Since the Fleant, basically, he's kind of like a backup Alden in a way. So if you're on Bastion Prime, his first skill gives him 5,000 power. So he's an 18k on his own, which is pretty cool. But then also he has the effect of when he stands by your card's ability, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, this unit gets 5k power when it stands back up. So this is really cool because it's basically kind of like a miniature Alden, but it's also just a really, really good booster as well. Like if you set up the order, Pride to Protect, and then you also have this in the back row just boosting your units. When this stands back up from the Bastion Prime skill, you'll have a really, really large booster that will just make your grade 3 attacks just even larger. So I really, really like the greedy play with this, and it's kind of up to you with what you want to like swap this around with. I've seen lists where they play more copies of this. I've seen builds where they play more Reflux for the Soul. And I also see builds with the lag rail, obviously, as well. So it's completely up to you with what you want to do with that. But I wanted to go for more of a streamlined build and just go for more like beats, basically. So yeah, the 2 copies of this I felt like were nice, just as a sort of like a backup attacker, like an Alden, but also just a good supporting unit, basically, for boosting later in the game. So yeah, really, really nice. So 2 copies of Fleant. Alright, and then we're getting more to the straightforward stuff here. We, of course, have our 4 Perfect Guard. Don't really need to explain why. It's just a staple for all the decks. But yeah, still playing those. And of course, another staple is the Overtrigger. I've had this happen once, and this card can just pop off still. If you have the right field set up, you can get just a ton of draw out of nowhere. And yeah, you can just start rolling and rolling with these cards. Also, funny interaction, which doesn't really come up that often, but if you do have like a Bastion Prime in the rearguard circle, let's say you called it from like a fort skill or something, if you get the Overtrigger, you do actually get the triple drive from this from the rearguard, which is very funny. Didn't actually realize that until the scenario almost presented itself. But yeah, that's just a cliche scenario which might not come up too often, but something to take note of though, which is funny. So yeah, 1 copy of the Overtrigger as per usual. And then for the trigger lineup, this is where it gets a little bit weird. So I suppose it's not too strange. So first we do have the 4 crit, of course. I do like this just because you can call this out with the fort skill in the early game, and I don't feel too bad about it since you could always just put it into the soul with its skill to then facilitate an Alden skill later for the draws. So that's actually not too bad. So I do like playing the skill crit, obviously, just with that soul power if it does come up. But then I also do like playing the 4 draw trigger. This obviously came out in set 4, and the reason I like maxing on the draws at the minute in this deck is because since I'm not playing the lag rail build, I do like to make sure that I've got enough draw power in this deck to see my pieces, and that's one major thing with the Bastion Prime deck is that it's very, very piece reliant. Like, we want to see a lot of different stuff in this deck, and I feel like the 4 draw just helps us facilitate seeing those things consistently. So yeah, and then outside of that, the draw triggers is also a really nice discard fodder, just in case you want to hold on to everything else in your hand. So that's not too bad. So that's what I decided to go with there. And then the other trigger that I went with is actually 3 copies of the front trigger. So the front trigger I decided to go with instead of more crits is because the shield value of this right now is actually been putting in a lot of work. The games that I've done with this deck recently, the 20k shield has actually helped massively. Like, getting those 1 card potential guards is just really, really good for facilitating hand size and, you know, generally just not dying. So yeah, if you did want to put in some more copies of, say, like the Embrace Dragon, I wouldn't blame you, since the extra shield value can actually come up a lot. But since I do have the Embrace Dragon and the front triggers in here, I felt quite comfortable with that in terms of defense. But in terms of an aggressive push, the one downside with the fronts is that it does require more of a field setup for you to get maximum value out of it. But like I said, I wanted to go for more of a like greedy sort of power aggro build with like Fleance and stuff like that. So the fronts kind of like help capitalize on that play style, and I really, really like it. But if you did want to replace these for like more crits, for example, that's completely fine. You can do that as well. But this is sort of like the build that I've been preferring at the minute. So a bit more of a rainbow build. Just to finish the rainbow off, obviously, we do have the 4 heal, which is just standard. So yeah, so that's the trigger lineup that I decided to go with. It's very, I suppose, a very safe build, I suppose. But I do have reasons for the choices of the triggers, and it does compensate with the style of play that I decided to go for with the deck. So yeah, that's basically Bastion Prime. I actually really like this deck. I do like the aggressive nature of the deck overall. It's got elements of like old Bastion in here, which is still present, but I feel like with the combination of the new units that we have and the resource management that we have in this deck now, as well as the new tools like the defensive stuff of like the Embrace Dragon, it just feels nice, and it feels good to like build towards something with like the Bastion Prime and just have a really, really explosive turn, just pop off and just like hopefully kill the opponent that turn, right? So yeah, that's basically it for the deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope I explained everything well enough. And yeah, in terms of the next deck, I'm not too sure at the minute. I'm probably going to be going over to V Premium for a bit, since I am looking forward to reconstructing Ezel again for V Premium, since it's been quite a long time since I've looked at Ezel, but yeah, hopefully I'm going to get the cards for that soon, but we will see. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this look into my Overdress decks with Draconic Overlord recently, and then obviously the Bastion Prime. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. So I will catch you guys in the next video. So this is Guardian 205, signing out.